If you're listening right now, take a second to subscribe, because what happened that night had already been written into the fabric of the universe long before the man ever stepped into it. The gas station off Highway 17 was shutting down for the night, its neon sign flickering softly in the cold air. The man locking the door believed he was alone, unaware that the silence around him was not ordinary silence, but the anticipatory hush of something vast and unseen drawing close. The fog that crept across the pavement had not formed naturally. It had been guided, shaped, pulled into place like a curtain slowly closing before a performance. Above the clouds, beyond the range of human sight, a presence moved with intention. It had been watching the man for months, tracing his routines, his sleep patterns, the quiet exhaustion beneath his ribs. It knew when he was most vulnerable, when his mind would resist the least. And now, as he walked across the parking lot with his keys in hand, the moment arrived. The universe shifted. Sound did not merely fade, it collapsed. Every vibration, every distant car, every hum of electricity dropped into absolute stillness. The man felt the pressure first, a tightening in the air around his skull. He lifted his head just as the first glow appeared above the fog, a circular ring of pale light descending with perfect, calculated precision. He believed he was seeing something impossible. But to the presence watching from beyond dimension, nothing about this was impossible. It was a scheduled event, a precise intersection of paths, one human life crossing a threshold it was never meant to understand. As the ring lowered itself to just above the ground, the fog retreated, swirling like liquid under an invisible force. The man's heartbeat accelerated, though he didn't know why. His instincts urged him to run, but his body had already begun to fall under the influence of the frequency, an inaudible command woven into his bones. The silhouettes emerged next. They were not stepping into existence. They were revealing themselves, their forms slipping through layers of reality thinner than paper. Tall, narrow, impossibly smooth, they analyzed him from every angle simultaneously, their perception stretching and folding through dimensions his mind could never grasp. The tallest figure tilted its head, not because it needed to, but because it understood humans read intention through gestures. A message formed, not spoken, not heard, but placed directly into the man's awareness. Come forward. He did not want to obey, but the decision was not truly his. At a higher vantage, a perspective that saw past time, the moment of obedience had always been certain. His feet carried him toward the ring with dreamlike slowness, each step matching a rhythm his conscious mind could not detect. The ring pulsed. The world dissolved into sharp blue light and the man's senses shattered. Up became down. Cold became warm. The boundaries of his body melted as gravitational reference slipped away. And then everything reassembled into a chamber without walls, a space not built but formed, reshaping itself according to the presence that controlled it. He hung suspended, held in place by forces with no human equivalent. The silhouettes floated around him, studying him with an intelligence that moved like fluid thought. One approached until its face hovered inches from his own. No eyes, no mouth, only a shifting darkness, as if reality itself bent around its features. A single finger touched his forehead. In an instant, his consciousness opened. Images cascaded through him. Twin suns rising over an alien horizon, structures carved from radiant material, vast fleets drifting through cold, silent space. And beneath it all, a sense of purpose more ancient than humanity. The message was clear. This is not an abduction. This is a selection. When the man regained awareness, he was back in his car, engine running, dawn warming the sky. But his shirt was reversed, his watch was gone, and a glowing blue mark pulsed faintly on his forehead, a mark that would fade from his skin but not from the memory of whatever had chosen him. He never spoke of it, but the presence continued to watch. It always would. Long before the girl stepped outside that night, the sky had already begun preparing for her. It had watched her for years. The way she lingered by the window, the way she traced constellations with her finger against the glass, the quiet ache she carried without fully understanding why. The universe knew her curiosity would lead her to this moment, and everything around her subtly aligned to make sure she walked outside at precisely the right time. Her house stood on the edge of a vast field, a place where darkness fell more honestly than in the city. At 2:17 a.m., when the last light in her home finally went out, the wind shifted. Crickets stilled. The air cooled as if exhaling in anticipation. She felt something, an impulse she could not name, pulling her out of bed. No fear, no urgency, just a gentle insistence that nudged her toward the back door. She slipped on her shoes and stepped into the night. Above her, the stars flickered differently than usual. Not brighter, more intentional, as if adjusting themselves for what was about to pass between sky and earth. A thin band of clouds drew back like curtains shifting aside, leaving a single patch of open sky directly above her path. The universe watched as she walked into the field's center, the grass brushing softly at her ankles. She paused, sensing the wrongness of the silence. Even the wind held its breath. Then the first light appeared. It emerged not from the horizon but from a point directly above her, so high that no aircraft could have hovered there. A single pinpoint of white, no larger than a star but impossibly clear. It brightened slowly, patiently, as if allowing her mind time to adjust, to understand that what she was seeing had not come from her world. The light did not descend. Space itself bent downward toward her. A funnel of shimmering distortion spiraled silently from the pinpoint, widening as it reached the air above her. The girl felt the shift before she saw it, a subtle pressure around her ribs, like the atmosphere itself recognizing her presence. The funnel expanded into a sphere of pale blue light, enclosing her within its radius. She was not afraid. Some part of her, older than her memories, older than her childhood, recognized this sensation, as though she were returning to a place she had never visited. Beyond the sphere, invisible observers examined her with intelligence far removed from human perspective. They watched not her body but the structure of her thoughts, the pattern of her emotions, the strange resonance her mind emitted when confronted with the unknown. She did not hear them, but they heard her. The ground beneath her feet softened, not physically, gravitationally. Her weight lessened, her breath deepened, and she felt warmth gathering at the back of her skull. Light curled around her shoulders like gentle hands lifting her upward. She rose slowly into the air. Her hair drifted around her like strands suspended underwater. The field expanded below her until it looked like a dark sea, and the house in the distance shrank to a single, silent shape. She made no sound. Her eyes remained open, reflecting the blue light spiraling around her. At the center of the sphere, the distortion parted. They emerged without form, then gradually shaped themselves into silhouettes, tall, smooth, shifting as though made from liquid glass. They approached her with the calm assurance of beings who had conducted this ritual countless times across countless worlds. They examined her gently, reading her not through words or gestures but through the subtle vibrations of her consciousness. What they found confirmed what they had long anticipated, a pattern in her mind that resonated with a frequency rare among her species. A match. The sphere brightened. For a moment, her body dissolved into strands of light, each thread humming with the echo of her memories. She did not feel pain. She felt clarity, an overwhelming sensation of finally understanding a question she had never known how to ask. The observers withdrew, carrying the pattern of her consciousness with them. Her physical form reassembled on the ground exactly where she had been standing. Her shoes touched the earth softly. Her breath resumed. But something fundamental had changed. The universe watched her blink slowly, processing the echo of the encounter, an echo she would never fully recall, though fragments would surface in dreams, in sudden flashes of understanding, in inexplicable moments of déjà vu. Above her, the sky closed again, folding the distortion back into the stars. The field regained its sounds. The wind finally exhaled. And the girl, now forever altered, walked quietly back to her house without knowing that her mind was no longer entirely her own. Long before the man ever stepped onto the remote mountain road that night, the universe had already mapped his path. It knew where his tires would slip on gravel, where he would slow down to adjust his radio, where the headlights would fail to illuminate the darkness gathering just beyond reach. His presence on that road was not random. It was inevitable, arranged quietly by forces far older than his species. The mountain was silent in a way that no natural landscape should be. Trees stood unnaturally still, their branches held in place as if waiting for permission to move again. Even the insects, creatures that never cared for cosmic affairs, had retreated into a hush. The air felt thicker than usual, not cold, but condensed, like invisible hands were folding it inwards, preparing it for what needed to happen. The man drove with the windows slightly open, unaware that every breath he took was being measured, counted, analyzed by observers far above him. They watched the way his pulse changed with each turn. They observed the slow fatigue gathering at the edges of his awareness. They noted the quiet sadness he carried, a weight he had never shared with another human being. All of it mattered. At 1:03 a.m. the radio signal flickered. A faint static rolled across the speakers. He tapped the console, thinking it was a malfunction. But the static was not static. It was communication, encoded, layered, filtered through frequencies the human brain was not designed to interpret. For a moment, the air tasted metallic, the way it does before lightning strikes. Then the headlights dimmed. Not completely. Just enough to change the tone of the darkness around him, to make the road feel narrower, the forest deeper, the world unfamiliar. He leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, unaware that above the treetops something had begun to descend. It revealed itself slowly, not through light, but through the absence of it. A perfectly circular void hovered above the road, bending the starlight around its edges. Nothing escaped its perimeter, not sound, not warmth, not the faint shimmer of the night sky. It was a silence so precise it cut through the air like a blade. The man pressed the brakes. The car rolled to a stop, gravel crunching under the tires. He felt pressure in his chest, as though the air had grown too dense to breathe. His heart beat faster, responding instinctively to a presence that existed outside human comprehension. The void pulsed. Light did not shine from it. Instead, the world around it dimmed further, as if the void were consuming every stray photon. The forest bent slightly inward, branches leaning toward the anomaly. The ground vibrated with a frequency low enough to rattle the fluid behind the man's eyes. Then the world stopped. Not metaphorically. Nonlinear time folded, paused, smoothed into absolute stillness. Leaves hung motionless in the air. Dust suspended itself inches above the road. The man's breath froze halfway through his lungs. Only one thing continued moving: consciousness. His mind was lifted out of his body like a thread being pulled from cloth. He felt weightless, separated, observed. The universe watched as his awareness drifted upward, drawn inexorably toward the void. His physical form sat motionless in the car, eyes wide open but unseeing, held in the grip of suspended time. Inside the void, shapes formed. Not solid, not anchored, but fluid silhouettes that shifted between outlines, each one an interpretation of a form, not the form itself. They surrounded him, their presence filling the space without ever touching it. They studied him with an intelligence that moved too quickly for linear thought, a swarm of decisions made simultaneously across multiple dimensions. They were not evaluating his body. They were reading his life. Memories unfolded around him like layers of transparent fabric. Childhood cold mornings, the trembling grief he hid at his father's funeral, the way he sometimes paused during conversations to swallow emotions he never voiced. All of it played out with perfect clarity. A resonance pattern formed around his consciousness. A match. Time released. He slammed back into his body with a gasp. The headlights surged to full brightness. The radio hissed and cleared. Leaves resumed falling to the ground. The void above him contracted into a pinpoint, then vanished like a pinhole closing in the fabric of reality. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. He did not know why tears were running down his face. But the universe did. It had chosen him, quietly, without explanation. And the mark left inside his consciousness would never fade, even if he never understood what had been taken, or what had been given in return. Long before the man descended into the abandoned mine that evening, something deep beneath the earth had already sensed him. It recognized the pattern of his footsteps, the rhythm of his breathing, the faint tremor of fear he tried to hide behind curiosity. He believed he had chosen to explore the mine on a whim, but the truth was simpler and older. The mine had been calling him for years, whispering in ways no human ear could register. The mine sat miles from any town, half swallowed by the wilderness. Its entrance yawned open like a wound, framed by rotting wooden beams that leaned inward as if trying to hold back what lay inside. Animals never approached it. The wind never entered it. Even the earth around it seemed strangely untouched, as if nature itself refused to cross an invisible boundary. The man stepped inside with a flashlight, unaware that the beam of light slicing through the darkness made no difference to the beings who watched him. The temperature dropped the moment he crossed the threshold, not because of the underground air, but because something ancient shifted its awareness toward him. It observed the way his skin responded, the goosebumps rising along his arms. It analyzed his pulse, measuring its fluctuations with microscopic precision. Every detail mattered. Humans were fragile, delicate creatures. He moved deeper into the tunnels, the beam of his flashlight illuminating rusted rails, broken tools, and graffiti left by thrill-seekers decades earlier. But after the first 100 meters, something changed. The air thickened, sound flattened. Even the scrape of his boots on stone grew muted. The mine was no longer a mine. It had become an observation chamber. He paused when he reached a fork in the tunnel. The left path tilted downward sharply, swallowed in darkness. The right path remained level but felt colder. The universe had already decided which way he would go. His hand lifted almost unconsciously, angling the flashlight toward the left tunnel. The observers noted the exact moment his instincts aligned with their intent. He stepped downward. The further he walked, the more the walls seemed to breathe, not visibly, but subtly, like the rock itself expanded and contracted with each second. Dust floated in the air but refused to settle. His flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied as if something unseen corrected it. When he reached the lower chamber, he stopped. The floor was covered in a thin layer of metallic dust that shimmered faintly, even without light. He crouched and touched it with 2 fingers. It felt warm, but warmth wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that the warmth pulsed, matching his heartbeat perfectly. Before he could process that, the chamber shifted, not physically, perceptually. The darkness bent inward from all directions, folding around him like fabric being drawn tight. His flashlight dimmed until it was nothing more than a pale circle on the floor. He looked up and the ceiling was gone. In its place was something vast, something alive. A shimmering field of silver light rippled across the space above him, like liquid metal suspended in midair. Patterns formed and dissolved inside it, spirals of information rearranging themselves faster than human eyes could follow. The man felt his thoughts slow, not because he was confused, but because the information above him was thinking for him, organizing his perception, calibrating it. A single drop of the silver light detached. It fell slowly, deliberately, ignoring gravity. Before touching the ground, it stretched, lengthened, unfolded, transforming into a slender figure made of fluid metal. It had no face, no mouth, no eyes, but its attention was unmistakable. It studied him with precision. The man stumbled backward, breath shaking, but the entity did not move. Instead, the floor beneath him shimmered. The metallic dust lifted, swirling upward around his legs, then around his torso, forming a spiral of tiny particles that gently lifted him off the ground. His fear spiked. The observers noted the spike. They adjusted the frequency of the chamber. Instantly, calm washed through him, not forced, not drugged, but induced with mathematical exactness. His heartbeat slowed, his breathing steadied, his eyes fixed on the metallic figure as if seeing something familiar in it. The figure extended an arm. 1,000 microscopic particles of light swirled around its hand, merging into a single bright thread that stretched toward the man's chest. It touched him, not physically, but through resonance, reading him, scanning the architecture of his consciousness. He felt memories rise to the surface. Childhood joy, early fears, years of loneliness he never admitted to anyone. They flickered around him as faint images suspended in the dust, each memory examined with clinical yet strangely gentle interest. The figure stepped closer, not to harm him, to imprint something. A message, one he would never consciously recall, entered him like a breath of cold air, settling deep within his mind. Not words, not images, but instructions written in a language older than human civilization. Then the dust released him. He fell softly onto the ground as if gravity itself had been adjusted to cushion him. The metallic figure dissolved back into the ceiling of silver light. The chamber dimmed, the tunnel brightened, and a single second later everything looked normal again. The man staggered backward, disoriented. His flashlight flickered back to full brightness. The metallic dust was gone, replaced by ordinary stone. He remembered nothing clearly, yet as he climbed back toward the surface, the observers watched with satisfaction. The imprint inside his mind glowed faintly, pulsing like a hidden star waiting for the moment it would be needed. The moment the universe had already prepared for him. Long before the woman reached the empty bus stop on the outskirts of the small town, the air had already begun to change around her. Not in a way she could detect, not in temperature or scent, but in structure. Molecules shifted subtly, aligning themselves like soldiers preparing for formation. The universe knew she would arrive exactly at 11:41 p.m., stepping into the pool of yellow light cast by the flickering street lamp. Her loneliness had called out far longer than her footsteps had. She sat on the cold metal bench, unaware that the night had grown unnaturally still. The wind no longer brushed the leaves. The distant hum of traffic faded. Even the insects that lived in the grass retreated into silence, sensing a presence descending from far above the atmosphere. She looked at her phone, not to read anything but to avoid thinking. The universe watched her thumb hover over the screen, watched the quiet sadness in her shoulders, watched the decision she had not yet made about leaving town. Every detail fed into the observers drifting closer, their curiosity sharpening like a lens focusing. At 11:43 p.m. the street lamp flickered. It did not dim, it recalibrated. Its light adjusted to wavelengths invisible to human eyes, sending a coded signal upward. The woman noticed only the faint buzz that accompanied it, a vibration that hummed against the back of her skull. Then the bus schedule sign began to distort. Not physically, perceptually. Letters wavered, stretching like reflections on disturbed water, then snapping back into place. Her vision blurred at the edges. She blinked hard, thinking it was fatigue, unaware that her mind was being softened, open, prepared. Above her, clouds parted in a way no atmospheric system could explain. A circular opening formed in the sky, perfectly symmetrical, perfectly still. Through it descended a sphere of pale white light, silent, weightless, and controlled with precision beyond any human engineering. It grew brighter as it dropped lower, but the brightness produced no glare, no discomfort. Instead, it softened the air around her, making her eyelids flutter with an instinctive calm. The woman stood up without deciding to. The observers noted the automatic response. They adjusted the field around her, making her movements smooth, dreamlike, compliant. She stepped toward the road as the sphere slowed to a stop just above the asphalt, light cascading around it like falling dust. The sphere shifted. Its surface rippled once, revealing something beneath, a structure, alive and mechanical at the same time, composed not of metal but of vibrating geometric layers. It was a pattern, a code, a presence wrapped inside light. A single line of brightness extended from its surface. It touched the ground directly in front of her, forming a narrow path of shimmering particles. She stared at it, heart beating softly, her mind too quiet to produce fear. She stepped onto the light. Instantly, the world around her dissolved into absolute silence. Not the silence of night, but a deeper, dimensional silence, one that pressed gently against her body as though she were being carried across a boundary invisible to most life. The sphere opened, and she was lifted, not by force, not by gravity, but by a shift in the rules around her. Her feet left the ground without her noticing. Her hair floated around her face. She felt weightless, calm, suspended in a vertical stream of soft white illumination. Time slowed, not metaphorically but physically. The beat between her heartbeats stretched. Inside the sphere they waited. They did not have bodies in the human sense. They appeared as layers of luminous outlines, shifting in and out of form, each movement a decision processed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. They observed her with quiet patience, assessing the patterns of her thoughts, the scar tissue of her emotions, the intricate network of choices that had led her to this exact moment. She did not understand what they wanted. They already knew. One of the figures extended something like a hand. A beam of pale blue light connected them, reaching toward her forehead. She did not flinch. The light touched her, and her consciousness widened in an instant, expanding like a horizon set free from its limits. She saw fragments of the universe, great luminous structures drifting through space, civilizations that breathed in radiation, cities carved into asteroid hearts. She saw signals traveling across the void, weaving a network far larger than humanity could perceive. She saw herself, the version of her that existed outside time, the version that the observers had been waiting to find. The light dimmed. When she opened her eyes again, she was sitting on the bus stop bench. The street lamp hummed softly. A bus approached from down the road, headlights cutting through the darkness. But something inside her had changed. Her memories of the encounter slipped through her mind like water through fingers, uncatchable but undeniably present. A calm settled in her chest, a sense of direction she hadn't felt in years. As the bus doors opened, she stepped inside with steady breath, unaware that the observers still hovered far above her, satisfied with the imprint they had placed within her mind. They would return for her, not tonight, but eventually. Long before the boy ever wandered away from the campsite, the forest had already begun rearranging itself around him. The trees shifted their branches just slightly, narrowing certain paths, widening others, guiding his small footsteps toward a clearing he had never seen before. Nothing about his detour was accidental. The universe had written this moment into his life long before he learned how to speak. His parents believed he had simply wandered off while chasing fireflies. They were wrong. The fireflies had dimmed themselves deliberately, pulsing in patterns meant not to attract but to redirect. Every flicker, every pause, every drift through the humid air carried encoded signals meant for the observers watching from far above the treetops. The boy followed because it felt natural. The forest, usually filled with night insects and distant rustling, grew unnervingly still. Even the wind held its breath, as if refusing to interrupt what was about to occur. The boy stopped beside a fallen log and listened, sensing a strangeness he could not name. His heartbeat quickened, not in fear but in anticipation, though he did not understand why. Above him, a particle in the night sky shifted position by the slightest margin. That was all it took. Within seconds, a presence began descending through the layers of atmosphere. It moved without friction, without sound, without resistance. It passed through the treetops, bending the branches outward in a perfect circular pattern, though none of them dared break. The boy noticed only the soft glow. A pale white light seeped through the leaves, gently pooling on the forest floor as if moonlight had decided to fall in a perfect circle. The boy stepped closer, curiosity guiding him the way gravity guides planets. The light thickened, not brighter, denser. It condensed into a column that stretched from the ground up into the sky, a narrow shaft of illumination with edges so clean it looked carved. The boy stared up into it, mouth slightly open, his breath forming tiny clouds that drifted upward, swallowed by the column. Then time slowed. The leaves froze mid-flutter. A branch swayed halfway and stopped. Even the tiny dust motes suspended in the air halted perfectly, as if the entire forest had been trapped inside a photograph. Only the boy remained unfrozen. Not because he was immune, but because he had been selected. Lights shifted above him as the observers adjusted their position. They examined him from every angle at once, not his body but the patterns inside his mind. His memories appeared to them like constellations, each emotion glowing with a specific frequency. They saw his fears, shadows under the bed, thunderstorms, the thought of losing his parents. They saw his joys, birthday candles, swings, the warmth of being held. They saw the quiet brilliance forming in him, something rare among his kind, a potential that had not yet surfaced. He tilted his head upward. Inside the column of light, a shape formed. Not a figure, at least not in the human sense, but an assembly of soft, shifting lines that resembled the outline of a being. It drifted downward like a thought taking shape. The boy felt weightless. His feet lifted off the ground gently, slowly, as though invisible hands were raising him with infinite care. His arms floated outward, his hair lifted around his face. He did not resist. Children, unlike adults, accept the impossible far more easily. The being approached until they were separated by only a breath of air. A single filament of light extended from its surface and touched the boy's forehead, and his mind opened. Images flooded him, stars collapsing, galaxies forming, immense structures suspended in void, life forms he could not comprehend communicating in harmonies without sound. He saw time from above, flowing not in a line but in spirals and branches. He saw himself, not who he was but who he could become. When the filament retracted, the boy drifted softly downward, his feet settling onto the forest floor as if landing on a cushion of air. The column of light dimmed, then collapsed inward soundlessly until it vanished into a single point above the trees. Forest resumed. Leaves fell. Air moved. Sounds returned. The boy blinked, confused, holding on to only the faintest impression of what had occurred. A warmth lingered on his forehead. A calm, unfamiliar understanding settled deep inside him, one that would grow with him, shaping him in ways his parents would never quite understand. He walked back toward the campsite, guided once again by fireflies now flickering normally. The observers watched him go. They would return for him, not as a child, but when he became the person they had just shown him he would be. Long before the man working the night shift stepped onto the rooftop for a brief breath of cool air, the city beneath him had already begun to rearrange its signals. Radio waves shifted their frequencies. Surveillance cameras glitched for a fraction of a second. Streetlights flickered in synchronized patterns that no human eye could interpret. The universe was making room for an event that did not belong in human time. The rooftop was quiet, too quiet for a city that was usually drenched in relentless noise. Horns, engines, distant conversations, humming transformers, all of it dimmed without actually stopping, as if someone had lowered the volume of the world. The man didn't notice. He only felt a subtle pressure in his ears, like he was standing at the edge of a storm that hadn't formed yet. Above him, far beyond the tallest skyscraper, a thin ripple moved across the sky. It wasn't light. It wasn't shadow. It was space itself bending, loosening, preparing. The man leaned against the metal railing, exhaling sharply after another exhausting hour of paperwork that would never matter. He looked over the glowing city, unaware that thousands of tiny decisions, every shift in his routine, every forgotten detail, every elevator delay, had been gently nudged by the observers to bring him here at precisely 2:12 a.m. That was the moment the ripple returned. It deepened, and something descended. Not like a craft, not like a light, not like anything that could be photographed. A distortion fell through the sky like a drop of ink spreading through water. It widened as it approached the rooftop, slowing until it hovered 10 meters above him. Time didn't pause. It stretched. Sound warped. The distant hum of traffic elongated into a long, soft tone. Air thickened, as if the atmosphere itself resisted what was entering it. The man straightened slowly, eyes drawn upward by instinct rather than conscious decision. The distortion rotated. Its surface rippled with impossible depth, revealing layers of shapes that were not shapes, patterns that flickered between geometric and biological, mechanical and fluid. The man took a step back, his breath hitching, but there was nowhere for him to run. The distortion had already anchored itself to him. A single line of light extended downward. It did not touch the rooftop. It touched his mind. His knees buckled. For a moment he saw nothing but darkness. Then the darkness unfolded like an enormous curtain being drawn back, revealing a panorama of stars that did not belong to Earth's night sky. His consciousness drifted upward, pulled gently into a vastness beyond imagination. The observers studied him. They examined his life the way a scientist examines a specimen, every choice, every failure, every moment of wonder or grief. His memories glowed like floating shards around him. They watched the way he had always looked at the night sky with a kind of longing he never admitted. They observed the loneliness he tried to outrun with work. They saw the quiet potential he didn't know he carried. A resonance formed. A match. His eyes widened. A figure emerged from the distortion. Not solid, not singular, but a shifting outline made of luminous segments that rearranged themselves with each movement. It stepped forward without gravity, without mass, its presence bending the rooftop around it. It reached toward him. Not physically, but dimensionally. A wave of soundless communication washed over him, so vast and complex that his brain could interpret only fragments. Distant worlds, ancient structures woven through space-time, a network of consciousness spanning stars. One message stood out: you are not unnoticed. The light expanded, swallowing his vision. For an instant he floated above the city, or perhaps the city floated beneath him. He could see every building at once, every street, every person still awake. He sensed the shape of the world, its fragile place in a cosmos full of minds far older than humanity. Then everything snapped back. He found himself on his knees, trembling, hands pressed against the cold rooftop surface. The distortion above him folded into a thin line, then vanished into the sky as if it had never been there. Sound returned abruptly. Traffic, air conditioning units, distant voices. The world resumed, but his world did not. A faint glow flickered behind his eyes when he blinked, something left behind, something he did not understand yet. He staggered to his feet, gripping the railing for support, staring into the sky as if expecting the distortion to return. It would, not tonight, but when the imprint they placed inside him began to activate. The observers had marked him, and the universe never marked anyone without purpose. Long before the old fisherman pushed his boat into the still waters that night, the ocean had already begun to change its behavior. Currents shifted direction without wind. The tide held unnaturally steady. Waves that should have broken against the rocks slowed, flattening into a glassy calm. The sea itself was preparing, quietly, obediently, for what was about to rise from its depths. The fisherman believed he had gone out late simply because he couldn't sleep. But the universe knew better. His insomnia, his instinct to check the nets, the way he hesitated before stepping onto the deck, all of it had been nudged into alignment by a presence far older than the water beneath him. The stars reflected perfectly on the surface that night, each one mirrored with uncanny clarity. The fisherman noticed the beauty of it, unaware that the reflection wasn't natural, it was a measurement. The observers above used the starlight on the water as a grid, a calibration field, a map for what they needed to extract. He paddled farther from shore, humming quietly, unaware that the world around him had already begun to bend. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the water below his boat stilled completely. It didn't calm, it froze. The fisherman stopped rowing. His breath caught in his chest as he leaned over the side, studying the suddenly motionless surface. The moon reflected back at him in a perfect circle, but the reflection was wrong, too sharp, too bright, too still. It looked like a hole, a doorway. Then the temperature shifted. The cold didn't come from the air, it came from below. The sea exhaled a deep, ancient chill that vibrated through the boat's wooden frame. The fisherman gripped the edge, feeling the boards tremble under his hands. Something enormous was rising, not quickly, not violently, with intention. The water bulged upward, not pushed by force, but pulled upward by something beneath it. Light, pale, shimmering, otherworldly, spread through the water from below, illuminating millions of tiny particles suspended in vertical motion. They weren't bubbles. They were signals. A column of radiant blue broke the surface, spiraling upward like liquid glass extruding itself slowly into the air. It wasn't water anymore. It was something denser, something alive, something that formed itself into a smooth shape that towered above the fisherman's trembling boat. He watched with his mouth open, unable to move. The universe had already removed the option of movement from him. The column of blue light curved inward, reshaping itself into a smooth sphere suspended a meter above the water. Waves formed perfect concentric rings around it, rings that never broke, never faded. Then the sphere opened, not with a crack or a seam, but with a ripple of dimensional distortion. A gap formed in its center, revealing a darkness so deep it seemed to swallow the starlight. Slowly, carefully, a presence emerged from within, tall, slender, composed of shifting layers of luminescent material that folded and unfolded like breathing light. The observers surrounded him. He did not see all of them. Some remained above the sphere, invisible, measuring the electrical impulses in his brain. Others drifted below the surface, analyzing the chemical patterns in his breath, the microscopic changes in his pulse. One stepped closer. The boat tilted slightly, not from weight, but from a subtle gravitational shift the being carried around itself. The fisherman felt pressure in his skull as a thin filament of blue light extended from the entity's chest. It touched his forehead. Instantly, his mind expanded outward like a tide pulled away from the shore. He saw the ocean from above, a living network of energy veins stretching across continents. He saw the deep trenches glowing with structures no human vessel had ever detected. He saw fields of light suspended miles below the surface, life forms older than Earth's continents, civilizations hidden beneath pressure that crushed human bones instantly. He saw the history of the ocean, and then he saw the future of it. The filament pulsed once. The fisherman gasped, his memories scattering like schools of startled fish. His childhood flashed before him, his mother's voice, his father's boat, the first fish he ever caught. Each memory was catalogued, examined, understood. The observers found what they were searching for, a resonance, a compatibility, a pattern in his mind rare among humans. The sphere dimmed, the filament retracted. The fisherman fell backward into the boat, breath trembling, hands shaking violently. The being dissolved into a cascade of blue particles that drifted downward, sinking silently into the sea. The sphere collapsed into itself and vanished with a soft implosion. And the water moved again. Waves resumed their gentle rocking. The night sounds returned. The ocean exhaled a warm breeze as if nothing had happened, but something had. A faint glow lingered beneath the fisherman's skin, a trace of the imprint placed within him, pulsing with the rhythm of distant tides. He rowed back to shore in silence, unaware that the observers watched him from beneath the waves, tracking the new frequency in his mind. They would return for him when the sea called again. Long before the woman stepped into the empty train car that night, the world had already begun preparing the space around her. The fluorescent lights in the station adjusted their brightness by imperceptible fractions. The security cameras entered a silent loop, repeating 4 seconds of footage over and over. Even the rails beneath the platform vibrated with a frequency too low for human bones to detect. All of it was preparation. All of it was for her. She slipped into the last car of the midnight train just as the doors hissed shut. She thought she was alone because she was meant to think that. The universe had arranged it carefully, delayed 3 other passengers by seconds, rerouted a maintenance worker, triggered a brief malfunction in the preceding car's air conditioning system. It needed silence. It needed isolation. The train pulled away from the platform, sliding into the dim tunnel with a gentle rumble. The woman lowered herself into a seat near the door, unaware that the hum of the electric motor had already begun to distort. Not louder, deeper, like a voice forming beneath the noise. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the train lights flickered, not randomly, in sequence. A cascading dimming that traveled from the front of the car to the back, as if something unseen had passed overhead, brushing lightly against the bulbs. The woman frowned, looking up, unaware that time around her had just begun to unspool. The train slowed, not because of the tracks, but because something else had entered its path. A soft vibration pulsed through the floor. Her seat trembled gently. She placed a hand on the metal pole beside her, feeling the cold surface warm ever so slightly, as if reacting to her touch or preparing for what was about to reach through it. She glanced down the empty car and saw the distortion. At first it looked like heat haze, a subtle rippling of the air at the far end of the car, but it thickened quickly, forming a circular distortion that shimmered without light or color. It expanded until it spanned from ceiling to floor, a perfect ring bending reality inward. The woman froze, breath shallow, her fingers tightening around the pole. The distortion rotated. A faint hum filled the air, not mechanical, not electrical, but vibrational, resonating directly against the bones in her chest. She felt it more than she heard it. Her heartbeat stuttered, then steadied at a new rhythm that wasn't hers. The observers adjusted the frequency. Fear softened, tension dissolved. Her breathing grew slow and rhythmic, her mind opening like a door gently pushed ajar. Inside the distortion, a shape formed. A tall silhouette, smooth and pale, its outline shifting with each movement as if composed of layers of translucent material. It did not walk. It drifted forward, gliding without friction, without sound. The train did not sway with its presence. The air itself parted to let it move. The woman tried to stand, but her body chose stillness, not paralysis, acceptance. The being stopped 3 meters in front of her. The train lights dimmed to a soft glow. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the presence reached toward her, not with an arm but with a ripple of light that extended from its chest like a slow exhale. The ripple touched the air between them, forming a narrow bridge of shimmering particles. Tiny motes drifted along it, pulsing in a pattern too complex for the human eye to decipher. She felt the first pulse strike her mind. Her vision blurred, not outward, upward. She rose without rising, her consciousness lifting out of her body like mist. The train around her dissolved into layers of transparent geometry. The tunnel walls stretched into infinite corridors of light. The hum of the train became a soft, harmonic tone. The observers watched her thoughts unfold. Childhood memories, fears she never voiced, private hopes she had abandoned years ago. Every memory glowed with a faint signature, a unique wavelength they examined with meticulous care. They mapped her inner world, tracing emotional structures like cartographers studying terrain. And then they found it, the resonance, a quality so rare that only a handful of humans ever carried it. The ripple of light brightened. A second pulse struck her mind, deeper this time. She gasped, her physical body twitching lightly in the seat. A warmth spread across her forehead, then down her spine, then into her chest, settling in a place she could not name. A message formed in her mind. Not words, a direction, a purpose. The distortion contracted rapidly, pulling the being back into its center. In less than a second, the shimmering ring collapsed into a point of darkness, then vanished entirely, leaving only the still hum of the train in its wake. The lights returned to their normal brightness. The rails vibrated softly. Time knitted itself back together. The woman blinked, staring at the empty aisle, unsure how long she had been gone, though her body had never left the seat. The train slowed as it approached the next station. She stood shakily, holding the pole with trembling fingers. A faint glow pulsed beneath her skin, visible only to the observers who were already rising above the city again, satisfied with the imprint they had left. She stepped off the train, a different person than the one who stepped on. And though she would not understand it for years, the universe had just set her on a path that led far beyond the reach of Earth's rails. long before the man working late in the archive basement opened the last storage box of the night. The building itself had already begun to rearrange subtle elements around him. Dust particles shifted in patterns that mirrored distant constellations. The ventilation system adjusted its airflow until the hum aligned with a frequency not of human origin. Even the fluorescent lights settled into a steady, unnatural stillness. No flicker, no buzz, just a perfect, silent glow. The universe had chosen this basement. It had chosen him. He believed he had volunteered for overtime because of deadlines. But something deeper had drawn him there, an instinct nudged into place by forces far beyond the walls of the archive. His arrival at 1:12 a.m. was not coincidence. It was synchronization. He placed the box on the metal table, unaware that the pages inside already reacted to his presence. The ink on the oldest documents shimmered with microscopic vibrations, aligning themselves with the unseen observers above. The room grew colder, not gradually, instantly. The kind of cold that felt intelligent. He rubbed his arms and stepped back. The air thickened. Sound dissolved, and the basement exhaled, not with wind but with pressure, a dimensional shift that pushed the world aside to make space for something else. The man turned slowly, sensing a presence long before he saw it. His heart beat once sharply as he scanned the shadows, but the shadows were not where it entered. It entered through the spaces between things. The concrete wall rippled like disturbed water. A soft glow seeped through the cracks, not light leaking through but light forming from the matter itself, as if concrete could be persuaded to shine. The glow spread outward, knitting itself into an oval shape suspended in the air. The ellipse rotated. Reality thinned. A distortion expanded from its center, a shifting curtain of translucent material that looked like heat, light, and thought combined. It widened until it reached floor to ceiling, a portal with no defined structure yet perfect geometry. The man stepped backward, but the universe had already removed the possibility of escape. Time softened around him. His limbs felt weightless. His thoughts slowed to the pace of a drifting dream. The light from the distortion washed over him, turning the dust in the room into glittering particles that hung motionless midair. Then the observers entered. They did not have bodies, at least not in the way humans understand form. They appeared as overlapping layers of luminous arcs, each one shifting independently, creating silhouettes that changed shape with every movement. Their presence filled the basement without touching the floor. The man's mind thinned. His fear faded. His heartbeat realigned itself to a frequency they imposed gently, not to control him but to prepare him. One of the beings drifted closer. A narrow band of light unfolded from its center, stretching toward him like a living ribbon. It hovered inches from his chest, shimmering with thousands of tiny points of code-like light. Before he could react, the ribbon plunged into him, not physically, but through the space where thought meets perception. His consciousness exploded outward. He was in the basement and above the building and in orbit, and in a place without stars all at the same time. He saw the Earth from thousands of angles. He felt the thinness of its atmosphere. He heard an ancient hum beneath the planet's magnetic field, something the human species had forgotten how to listen to. Images flashed faster than thought, a continent-sized structure hidden beneath polar ice. Beings communicating in cascading harmonics, a sphere drifting through space with no engine, no thrusters, only intention. A vast chamber beneath the desert glowing. A network of minds intertwined like rivers. A future humanity was not ready to understand. The ribbon pulsed, and the observers studied the way his consciousness responded. They searched for particular qualities, resonance patterns, emotional stability, adaptability to higher dimensional information. They sifted through his memories with gentle precision. His first heartbreak, his childhood curiosity about stars, the loneliness he hid behind quiet routines, the quiet, persistent hope he never voiced. They found what they were looking for. The ribbon brightened. A final pulse entered him, leaving behind an imprint so deep it would shape the rest of his life in ways he would never fully grasp. He exhaled sharply, tears sliding down his cheeks without emotion attached, only physiological reaction to knowledge too large to hold. The ribbon withdrew. The beings folded backward into the distortion, their forms dissolving into cascading layers of light. The elliptical portal collapsed inward with a silent implosion, leaving only the cold basement, the silent documents, and the trembling man standing alone. Time resumed. The dust fell. The lights hummed. The archive returned to its ordinary shape. The man sank into a chair, gripping the table with trembling hands, breathing unevenly as the remnants of the experience echoed through him. He tried to speak but could not form a single word. Something warm pulsed faintly beneath his sternum, a presence he could feel but not understand. The observers drifted away from the building, rising through the night sky, leaving behind the smallest of traces inside him. They would watch him, not constantly, not invasively, but with purpose, because the universe did not choose people at random, and the imprint inside him was just the beginning of something much larger.